Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So I'm listening in on the meeting already in progress regarding the new dress shop. Uncle Barley and Grandpa have concerns because they've already ordered supplies for the original plans for the new house. Now Uncle Benny and Ricardo are concerned because they've already cut some of the wood and started on the work. Big Daddy is very concerned because he doesn't want to disappoint Aunt Bess and Aunt Janie. Meanwhile, Albert is assisting Saidi in writing a letter to Marguerite's parents to give to Big Daddy. Big Daddy had already promised to put in a good word for Saidi to get permission from her father in order to court her. Saidi is also thinking of a way he can confirm that Marguerite likes him. Big Ma even chimed in that any materials that aren't used for the new designs inside the dress shop can be used toward the rest of the renovation of the rooming house. Meanwhile, back in the dining room, Lillian is trying to get cornbread out of her hair because the boys had started throwing it during dinner time. Isabel and Lillian are ready for Violet to come get the children and escort them outside for some playtime before it's time for their parents to come pick them up. Isabel is also concerned because she needs to straighten up before the men come to eat. Meanwhile, upstairs in the rooming house, Marguerite is having a conversation with little Tracy. She lives in the original dollhouse, but she's over visiting and playing with the toys in the children's room. Nobody really stays in the children's room right now because there are no children who are actually resident. The kids that come here just come to stay for the day. Marguerite is telling Tracy how she detests being treated like a child and she really wants to be treated more like an adult. Although Tracy is a little girl, she does empathize with how Marguerite feels. Violet came up to let the girls know that it was time to come down for dinner, and she did overhear the conversation. As Violet led the girls down for dinner, she tried to think of ways she could make things better for Marguerite. By the time that Marguerite and Tracy got down to the dining room, the children were preparing to leave. Isabel and Lillian are happy. Lillian was going to play with the children outside later, but she needed to help get things set up for the men to come eat. Just then they heard Violet at the door, beckoning the children to come into the hallway so that they could go outside. Isabel and Lillian were so relieved because they were finally able to take a little break. Isabel and her husband have 3 children, so she helps out a lot with the other children. After the children left, her and Lillian laughed. They were laughing about how much easier it is to feed the men than to feed the children. The ladies also advised Marguerite that if she needed anything, they weren't far away. If you hear the children, we're nearby. Isabel assured Marguerite that here at the rooming house, everybody's family. Meanwhile, back in the hallway, Violet was trying to get the children together so she could take them outside. And as usual, the boys were fighting over who was going to ride the bike first. Violet advised the boys to be careful because there was mail on the floor waiting to be picked up by the mailman. Violet's husband, Albert, heard her voice and came out to greet her. As they greeted each other, Violet informed Saidi that Marguerite was in the dining room. Saidi left and told Albert he would be right back. Saidi admired how in love Violet and Albert were. He wanted to be like that with Marguerite. Saidi showed up in a little while with a bouquet of flowers in his hand. He looked at Marguerite and said, "Good evening." Marguerite said, "Hello." Marguerite was so surprised, all she could say was thank you. Saidi was so excited when he realized that Marguerite liked the flowers. That gave him hope that things would be okay. Tracy giggled while she watched Marguerite receive the flowers. Violet smiled and said, "It's springtime in the rooming house." Albert started laughing. By this time, everybody was laughing. Although Saidi was really happy, he really didn't have much to say after he handed her the flowers. Isabel said, "Let's find you a pretty vase for those flowers." Suddenly, they could hear everyone else rustling around outside the dining room door. Aunt Janie saw what was going on, and she came and stood protectively behind Marguerite. Marguerite was smiling and happily holding her flowers. When Aunt Bess saw the flowers and Saidi, she was furious. Uncle Barley was wondering what was going on, why Aunt Bess was so upset. Big Ma said that Aunt Bess has forgotten what it's like to be young and in love. Pop told Aunt Bess to leave those children alone. He just gave the girl some flowers, Bess. Saidi felt really bad. Uncle Barley questioned Aunt Bess further. What is the big deal about him giving her some flowers? Marguerite started to cry. Aunt Bess demanded that Tracy excuse herself because this was grown folks' conversation and she shouldn't be in here. Tracy obeyed and immediately got up and went out of the dining room. She closed the door and remained in the laundry room and listened to the rest of the conversation. Tracy didn't agree with Aunt Bess, and she didn't like the way that Marguerite was being treated. Tracy decided she would help Marguerite see Saidi. Tracy thought to herself, I'll be grown up and in love one day, and I don't want them to do this to me. Aunt Janie quietly comforted Marguerite and told her not to cry. Aunt Bess went on and on about how Marguerite was her responsibility. Aunt Bess insisted that Marguerite was here to learn to sew and not court. Saidi felt miserable that he had caused Marguerite all of this trouble. After dinner, Big Daddy assured Saidi that he would work things out and get in contact with her parents to get him clearance to properly court Marguerite. He told Saidi in the meantime to stay focused on work and to save his money. They all assured him that they understood how he felt and that they were on his side. They tried to explain to Saidi that Aunt Bess was harmless, that she was just being very protective of Marguerite because Marguerite was sent here under her care. In the meantime, finally, Big Daddy explained to Saidi that he would not be able to have meals with Marguerite in the dining room until he got clearance from her parents.